Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't deserve it. My name's Mark Levene. I'm a co-founder of something called Crisis Forum. My colleague, David Cromwell, who is equal co-founder, is sitting right here. And what this is all about today is one of the projects which we is to do with one of the projects we initiated about 3 or 4 years ago, called Climate Change and Violence. Now, what am I going to do? I might actually sit down in a minute so it's not, what I'm reading is not a million miles away from me. So bear with me, and I might sort of jump up and down at a given moment. I think it's interesting, given that we started this 3 or 4 years ago, how much water has passed under the bridge in the space of those 3 years, yet possibly a lot of it hasn't been for the better. I remember very distinctly being at a Tyndall meeting, again at a very august building in Piccadilly Gardens, about 4 years ago, where I tried to pursue what seemed to me at the time to be sort of a ludicrous agenda. I was trying to persuade a set of scientists and engineers and stats folks that what was at stake in looking at climate change was not just a matter of science, that it actually had human consequences and had to be seen in those terms. Nor could the subject, we have always argued in Crisis Forum all along, be monopolised by a particular group of government technocrats or big science experts. It's just too large, too all-embracing of the entirety of the human condition for that. So the position of Crisis Forum is, I think, on one level very clear, that the ownership of this issue is a question of human ownership through individuals, families, communities, the workplace, if I can use that rather outdated word, the common weal, not simply of policymakers, opinion formers, scientific advisors, or even NGOs who might claim to know best. Now, you can imagine when I'm not sure if I said all that at the Tyndall meeting, but there was a sort of a sense of resistance. Now, since then, of course, there has been a growing awareness, particularly one might say an elite awareness of the issues at stake, and you might say that this has opened up floodgates to a certain sort of involvement from diverse groupings, government agencies, corporate businesses, think tanks, and of course now big time as well, the military apparat, what one maybe historically referred to as the military-industrial complex, are coming on board, all wanting to consider the broader implications of climate change. And I want to just for a moment focus on this, on security implications. So the point now is that if you get in material which is coming to you on the email, there is so much of this coming in that it's almost deafening. Every day there is information about some new conference or position paper or even simulated war game which involves climate change as part of its war gaming. The latest I have, for instance, by email is awareness, something which has actually now just passed, of a multi-government agency-sponsored 3-day event in Paris entitled The Importance of Military Organisations in Protecting the Climate, 2008. You can take that as you will. Now, what rather worries us at Crisis Forum is that elites, in their attempts to grapple with that challenge, are coming from a premise associated with the world as it was, or perhaps more accurately, the world as they thought it was, not the world as it is becoming. And that, to our mind, carries with it a perpetuation of what in shorthand might be called business as usual, which we deem to be responsible in critical part for the mess we find ourselves in. Having got us this far, populations worldwide are now expected to fall into line behind the carriers of the status quo and to accept recommendations, solutions, very often as if they are givens, whatever they may be, however unsustainable their modus operandi. You will see and hear from these few lines that Crisis Forum is an independent and possibly obstreperous body of people. It is not here to please policymakers or even necessarily to request their ear. It is to interrogate where we are at and to consider perhaps this premise: how, despite what could be seen to be the collapse of conventional economic wisdoms, business as usual remains the order of the day, and hence the degree to which that same business as usual, however reformulated and repositioned for the conditions of the now and hereafter, may itself be a leading factor in the acceleration and amplification of stress, violence and conflict at all levels of human polity and society. But what do we mean by climate change and violence? Ideally, one could throw in here some more theoretical discussion, and actually, after we set the order for today, I had a very interesting paper come in which wanted to present exactly this and was speaking about climate conflict as a new paradigm. And maybe we'll come back to that paper at some other stage. But I want to emphasize that what we're trying to do here is not just about politics or geopolitics. Violence can be understood in very broad terms, indeed as any manner in which hurt is inflicted on human beings, other creatures, or the environment writ large. The agency could indeed be nature itself. We speak of earthquakes, of volcanic eruptions, of hurricanes, as something to do with violence. But usually when we speak of this, we're most obviously relating it to what people do to other people. However, as I want to get into the presentations and not go on at length, let me offer something suitably broad and hence very, very discussable by way of an opener. Violence comes usually not out of situations of control, and one could then have a discussion about instrumental violence, but situations where there is a loss of control. That can apply to situations of political conflict, just as it could at a very domestic level to what usually men do to their nearest and dearest women and children in situations of stress. What is significant about the near future of climate change is that this loss of control is likely to be exquisitely absolute. That certainly begs some time-honoured questions. How out of control is nature compared from what it always has been? How predictable, indeed, were climate conditions ever in human history? To which a better pursuit might be made by our sister organisation, Rescue History. What the purpose of this workshop, however, is to try and do is draw out not simply the multiple levels upon which violence is likely to be enacted in our own contemporary anthropogenic climate crisis as it deepens, but by implications what a wider public themselves need to know and understand so they can be able to resist the worst effects, either directly of climate and hence food and water breakdown itself, or more possibly what polities and apparatuses of state might do to them in the face of this human-made crisis.